Hello everybody, welcome to ZAPTEST webinar. My name is Sergey. On today's webinar we will talk about ZAPTEST values parameterization, how to use data table, how to import export values to the data table, and use other sources for data source. Before we started, I will ask everybody to remain silent. You can keep muted your audio lines. If you have any questions, please use the WebEx chat. Send your questions to me, who is host or presenter, and I will answer your questions at the end during the Q&A session. Our webinar will consist of 3 parts. At the beginning, I will make a brief introduction to ZAPTEST, company, and products. Then we'll have main technical part of the webinar, and at the end, I will allocate some time for Q&A session. As the first part of the webinar, I will make brief introduction about who we are as the company, and we'll talk about main ZAPTEST offerings. We have been in the business over 20 years. We position ourselves as a full-stack cross-platform testing solution. With ZAPTEST, you can automate applications on mobile, Windows, Mac, Linux platforms, and we fully support agile development methodology. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. Our core technology is one script, which allows us to script test procedure once and execute it anywhere. We are the test optimization leaders, which means that with ZAPTEST you can automate any application, you can meet any development schedule, and you can accommodate any skill set of your team members. As a full-stack technology, we provide ZAPTEST users the test automation in a cross-platform fashion. This means that you can create your test script on one platform or environment and play it as is anywhere else. Besides that, we offer other technologies which are not commonly offered in the industry. For example, with ZAPTEST, you can auto-generate test documentation. Using ZAPTEST, you can offset a lot of man-hours of writing documentation manually. We also have technology for parallel device execution. The MRun ensures just-in-time regression testing. With MRun, you can connect to multiple devices with different platforms or different browsers and execute same test simultaneously on all of them. We also have device host management private cloud system, which we provide to ZAPTEST users. The farm offers test device management capability and provides universal access to the devices across organization for the purpose of a mobile application deployment, manual testing, automated testing, and parallel test execution. With ZAPTEST today, you can do API or web services testing. You can use the tool for the API standalone test automation or for building combined API and UI testing framework. The load component enables ZAPTEST users to do API performance testing as a continuation of their quality assurance process. As you can see, today ZAPTEST can be used as a one-stop solution for majority of quality assurance needs. During today's webinar session, I will create simple test script. It will use our website, and I will parameterize all values that will be used in my test script. In the course, I will demonstrate how we can approach parameterization, how to use data table values, how to control iterations, and how to use external data sources. Let me start with building my test script. First, I will access our website on the browser. This is the homepage, which is starting point of my test case. And now I will use ZAPTEST to scan the homepage. So press the Scan GUI button, move my mouse over the application under test window, which is Firefox browser in my case. During the scanning process, I can change name for the application. for the view. After the scan, I need to review objects that have been added. For my test, I need to keep a couple objects, one for ZAPTEST logo, another for the login link. I will delete all others. On the home page, I need to click login link, which loads the login page. This is another page that I need to scan. This is what I'm going to do now. I will define new application object and new view. The login page has different title. This is why it's better to use separate application object for it. From this scan, I need to keep and use objects that I need for entering username and password. It's going to be username, password, the login button, and this is it. I will delete all others. Let me change logical names for the edit fields real quick. Name for the login button. Okay, on the login page, I need to type values for username and password. This is a test user account. And when I log in, and my login is successful, the website shows welcome message. I want to verify the welcome message as part of my test script. For this, I'm going to scan this page as well. Okay, for this page, I defined separate view. I called it user zone. I will keep the welcome object and the logout button. Remove other objects. And looks like this is all the test objects that I need to use to build my test script. Now I will add steps to the scripting area to define my test script. I'm going to start with first application object ZAP. My first step will launch or open application under test. So I will use it to launch an instance of the browser. And as I mentioned before, I will parameterize all values that will be used in my test script. First argument of the launch method provides information about type of application that needs to be launched. For the browser, I just need to type browser type. It could be Firefox, Chrome, IE. And I'm going to parameterize it right away. For this, I need to highlight the value and through the context menu select use parameter. On this dialog, I can specify parameter name and value already there. I will use browser. With the launch method, I can provide second argument which holds URL for the browser to navigate. This is going our website. And this also will be parameterized. So I highlight the value, select use parameter, and make name for the parameter URL. If I look at the data table tab, I can see these two parameters added, one for browser, another for URL with their values. Let me continue adding steps. For the next step, I will use objects from my first view, from the homepage view. ZAPTEST object will be used to verify that my homepage is correctly loaded. For this, I'm going to use exist method. Then I need to click the login link. So with the login object, I need to use the click method. This step brings up the login page. From my login view, I'm going to use this object, username object, and exist method to verify the page and to synchronize it. As the next two steps, I need to enter values for username and password. Those values also will be parameterized, and I will add parameters directly to the data table. For this, to change the name of the column for the new parameter, I need to double click it, specify a new name. That will be username. And this is my user account name. Another parameter will hold value for the password. My password is test. Often we need to encrypt sensitive information in the data table. And for this, we can use encryption feature. ZAPTEST automatically recognizes the name of the parameter as password and offers me to encrypt its value. So I select yes. And after that, the password's value will be in encrypted format. Let me add steps to enter those values on the login page. We'll use type method. And to use the value, I can simply drag the name of the parameter from the data table. I will do the same thing for the password. To use type method and drag the value from the data table. To submit the login page, I need to click the login button. And for this, of course, I need to use click method. As the next step, I need to verify that my login is successful. Indication to this is the welcome message. With the welcome message, I need to use exist method, of course. Now, as you see, my welcome message includes hard-coded user ID, tester1. But I plan to run my test on different user accounts. So I need somehow parameterize the value of this object to make sure it recognizes correct user ID. There are two ways to do this. Among object properties, we have text, which controls text of the object that ZAPTEST will use at runtime to identify the object. And like any other property, it can be linked directly to the data table parameter. Whenever you see this button, it means that you can parameterize the value of this property. To use this button, I need to have this text in my data table. So one of the ways is to define additional parameter. Welcome text. So here I will use exact text of the welcome message. And now, since I have this text included in the data table parameter, I can use this object and its text property to link it directly to the parameter. So this is one way, but sometimes it's not very practical. Alternatively, we can define or change the property value programmatically through the test script. So let me get it back to its original value. And I'll demonstrate the other approach. Let me remove this parameter from the data table. Before I use exist method, I can programmatically modify the value of the property. For this, in ZAPTEST, we use setProperty method. So let me get this object to my test script. select set property. With set property, I need to specify name and new value for the property. Name of the property will be text as it appears in the list of properties. And new value I can construct based on expected value. So it will be constant welcome word space, and I will concatenate value of the test user account, which is a data table parameter. So this is alternative way. Let me continue working on my test script. Once we verified successful login and the welcome message displayed, I want to click the logout button, which should bring me back to the login page, where I should see and be able to verify username object. Okay, now I can save my test. To run this test, I need to log off my website session, close the browser, and just press the run button. So my test currently running. Goes over steps as I define them, navigates to the login page as you see, enter values for username and password. I have website on the login page, and as the last step I can add step to close the browser instance. For this I need to use application object for the ZAP login and use close method. Okay, right now in my data table I have single row of data with all the values that I defined during my test creation. If I want to run my test 2 or more iterations, I would need to add rows of data in the data table. So let me define another row. This time I want to run my test on Internet Explorer, so I specified IE. It's going to be the same URL. I will use different username, tester2. This is its password, which automatically gets encrypted. Let me make sure that my test objects are adapted to work with different browsers. From my second application object, I will modify properties. It's no need to have class, and for the title, I will remove any reference to the browser. Basically, I can leave only ZAPTEST forum. It's okay to select exact match with this class and title. After my first execution, I can open and review test results to make sure all my steps completed successfully. In the test result, you can see all the parameterized values, how they've been used. On the first step, the parameter used is Firefox. It's the name of the browser. This is my test user account, tester1. This is password. Of course, it's encrypted on the test results. And this is my definition of the welcome message text. And the outcome is 100% precision for the welcome object. By the way, for this object, it makes sense to change its property. Since it's a mix of regular words and the user account, it's better to use one-way detector. Let me run this test again. Now I have 2 rows of data in my data table, and I expect my test to run 2 iterations. Close any browsers that I have open and run my test again. In my first row of data table, I have Firefox. Test is running on Firefox right now. Let me open and review test results. Okay, this is my first iteration that uses values from the first row data table. And this is the second iteration, which launches Internet Explorer, uses tester2 username, password, sets the value for the welcome message, and successfully verifies the welcome text. So this is how we can use local data table. Often we need to use external, and next I will demonstrate how we can use it. Of course, I can recreate it in a file. In ZAPTEST, we support data import and export to and from CSV or Excel type files. I already have data added to my local data table. I can export it to create a file. I can use File menu, export data table to CSV. I define name for the CSV file. I can open and view it. This is the CSV file that I created by exporting data from a local data table. The first row used for name of the parameters. Then second row and third rows are used for actual data. If I open this file in a notepad, you will see that it's true comma-separated value format. Now, what we can do with external data file? We can import it at any time of the test, and for this we use data table import step. Let me show you how we do this. In my test script at the very beginning, I will define a step that will do the import. For this, the easiest way is to use that namespace, be extended to the data table, and import CSV command. With this, I need to include path to the CSV file. With this step, the values in the data table will be loaded from the file. I can remove data table values from my local data table. And when I run this test again, if I want to see what values being imported, I can put a breakpoint after the import step. Make sure all my browsers are closed. Yeah, obviously I need to close the data file to make it accessible by the script. Now I will try to run it. On a breakpoint at runtime, I can see the content of my data table. You can see the values loaded from the external data file, and those will be used during the test execution. As soon as the test stops, this information disappears, and the view of the local data table will return back to its design state. So let me remove breakpoint and continue the test execution. So ZAPTEST correctly used values from browser and URL parameters, login information, completes the first iteration and starts the second iteration with the Internet Explorer. And uses parameter values accordingly. If I open and view test results, I should see two iterations. Iteration 1 uses parameters from first row of external data. Iteration 2 uses parameters from the second row. This part works fine. Now, if I add values to my external data file, I expect my test script to run 3 iterations. Let me use Chrome browser this time. As you see, I'm editing the data file directly. I intentionally use incorrect password for my third iteration because I want my test to fail. Let me save this. Also, in my test script, I want to report status of the test execution, and I want status to be saved in the data file. Let me modify my test script. First of all, for the welcome message verification step, I need to use if welcome object exists, let's say for 10 seconds. And this is the timeout. False means that this step will not be reported to the test results, but I can add step to report it here with the regular exist. And for outputting status, I will use additional parameter. Let me go back to my data file. Okay, I'm going to define a force parameter for status. Leave value fields empty. In my test script, I will use that parameter to assign pass or fail status. To set the value to the parameter, I use data table set value. Here, of course, I need to specify name of the parameter. And its value. For my logic, when we detected welcome message, the status should be passed. If we're unable to verify welcome message, I need to provide status failed. Okay, also, when we have failed login, there is no point to press the logout. Let me move this step right here for the past outcome. And I expect username to be visible in case of the failed login. And then we close the browser. I need to have this parameter defined in local data table also. Beside that, I'm going to add step to export the data table to an external file. Let me do these two things. Status to export. I will be using ZAP data table export CSV. And it's going to be the same file that I used to input data from. Okay, now I'm going to run my test. I need to make sure that my session is not logged in. All browsers are closed. All right, let's run it. My runtime is on a data table tab, and you can see data that's been imported. So I expect this test to run 3 iterations, and now it looks like I have status for the status parameter. Okay, right now we are on the 3rd iteration. This is the one that provides incorrect login information. I expect this step to fail. Timeout for this step is 10 seconds. And we're done. Let me open and view test results. Okay, from the test perspective, we don't have any errors. All steps completed successfully for each of my 3 iterations, including 3rd iteration for the Chrome. If I open and view my data file, I have statuses reported for each iteration. So I have a passed for Firefox and the IE runs and failed for Chrome iteration, which is expected. All right, so this is how we can use external source for the values in a data table. Import, export them at runtime. You can use imports and export as many times as you need during your test run. It's perfectly fine to output your information to a different file. You just need to specify different file name here. And I'm using CSV file format. You can use Excel file as alternative. Another way to use external data source is by attaching external data source file. This is more applicable for load tests. Remember that in ZAPTEST you can create test script that will be used by virtual users in a load test execution. And for a load test we have sometimes different requirements for test data. To select external data source, we need to go to the test settings. And for the data source, I have 2 options. One for the data table, which means use of local data table or external data table with import step. Or I can switch to the test data. With the test data, I can navigate to the external file. Of course, I need to browse to the file. Okay, I have this Excel file which contains number of login accounts. So I selected it. There are additional options available for defining how that data will be used. First is data selection mode. You can see a number of options. We can use sequential. We can use sequential any, random, or unique. Sequential means that ZAPTEST will use information from all rows of data in the data source and send it to all virtual users the same way. Values will be used in a normal or sequential order. This option is similar to sequential, so each virtual user gets same set of data. The only difference is that the use of rows will be not in a normal order. More like random, the values never repeat themselves during a single cycle. Random selection is random. Same row of data can be called one or multiple times throughout the test. And for unique, we use when we have a requirement to run a set of data uniquely. What this means that ZAPTEST will divide your data source file evenly between virtual users. Once virtual users complete test rows, they will terminate their execution. We can define how many rows will be allocated for each virtual user. We can keep auto allocation, or we can specify how many rows will go to each virtual user. Data range policy can be used to break test data in parts and use them on different iteration cycles. Because here we can specify how we use all data row or range of rows, and we can define from which number of rows starts use of test data. This mostly applies to load tests, but it's still possible to use external data source with functional tests. If I select one of these, let's say random, press OK. I cannot use data table iterations. And when I press OK, if I go to the test data, it shows information retrieved from the external data source. Data file itself, this Excel file, let me open it. The same rule for any other type of data source. The first row should be used for parameter names. So I have my parameter names for browser, URL, username, and password. Then I have rows of data, and in this file I have 9 rows from 2 to 10. ZAPTEST test data, it shows that it represents simulation of the test data. What this means is that for the data allocation selection like random, it shows certain values, but not necessarily the same rows will be used at runtime. To demonstrate, I can run my test. Of course, I need to disable steps for import and export. Those no longer applicable for external data source. External data source is read-only. Let's save it. Make sure I have closed all browsers and run it. So as you see, ZAPTEST picks the row which has Chrome browser on it. I have a Chrome included in the first iteration, and it uses tester 5 test user account, which means that my row number is 5. For the second iteration, it uses Firefox. And it's the first row. So it looks like it's a true random data selection from the external data source. And my last iteration also uses Chrome browser and row number 5 for the test data. In my data table, I have only 3 rows displayed. Same number of rows is used for the test execution. This is because I'm on a ZAPTEST free edition. For a load test, if you define API test script and use external data source in the load module, there is no limitation for number of iterations. Iterations will be used as defined by the data policy or duration of the test run. This will conclude my technical part. I'm going to move on to the Q&A session. Again, if you need to send your question, use WebEx chat. I will read and answer them. Okay, looks like I have a couple questions so far. Is it still 3 iterations allowed when I use mrun? For free edition, there is limitation for 3 iterations only, regardless of one script or mrun. In mrun, you can connect 2 devices if you remain on the free edition. Those 2 devices will use same data, same 3 iterations that allowed. Okay, second question I have. Can I import data from a specific Excel worksheet? Yes, you can do this. In my presentation, I use comma-separated type. Alternative way, if you have your test data stored in the Excel format, you just need to use import Excel. With import Excel, we provide path as the first argument and the sheet name as the second argument. So this is how you can specify particular worksheet in the import step. Okay, looks like I don't have any other questions. I will conclude this presentation. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you for using ZAPTEST. If you have any questions or comments, or if you have ideas for future webinars, use our forum. Please use this to submit your questions if you need any help or if you have any comments or suggestions. Thank you very much again. Have a good day. Goodbye.